Hi everyone, Teresa Aker here from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker with our new channel going over to Life After 50 with Teresa Aker. And it is my pleasure today to bring back Jeff Lippman. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. So pleased and honored to be here for a second time.
Yeah, we had such a great time last time. I wanted to have you back. You give us some great advice and some ideas on legalities. And I wanted to bring people, different professionals that could help them with life after 50. And when I say that, it could be 60, 70, 80, doesn't matter. But I thought with people starting over, perhaps retiring, things like that, and want to start a side hustle or start a new business, there may be things you're aware of that they may not be, and just a general idea. So I wanted to bring you on for that, Jeff. So let's get started on that. You had talked a little bit about what happens if somebody perhaps retires and or gets laid off as a contractor, maybe wants to start a new business. Let's start there. Should they be looking at LLPs? What should they be doing?
Okay, first couple of caveats. One, I'm really happy to be back here because my mother actually watched the first one and was impressed. She thought I sounded really smart. Now, I don't know how I normally come off, but at least with on this show, I sounded really smart. Great, we'll take it. Also, I always have to say, this is not a substitute for independent legal advice. Always talk to your own lawyer, legal advisors, tax advisors, etc. This is for information purposes only. I'm licensed in the states of Maryland and the District of Columbia. I know DC is not a state, but let's just keep it simple. In your initial question, you said LLP. LLP stands for Limited Liability Partnership. So you wouldn't even consider an LLP unless there's more than one of you in an equitable position to do that. And you need not be an LLP to be in a multi-owner business. Corporations, by definition, have shareholders, and that can be more than one. LLCs have members, and that could be, by definition, more than one. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but there's a few circumstances that I see periodically or with frequency that come up for people over 50. And by the way, despite my boyish appearance, I turn Heinz 57 this calendar year. Actually,
Wow.
in just a few months. Yeah, I know. I'm exceptionally youthful looking.
Are.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for lying. That's great. And so there's the more pleasant version where you've been in a career for a long period of time and it turns out that you can make more money going into business for yourself as a subcontractor or independent contractor of a company or the government. This happens a lot with the government, and it's a little bit of a shell game, and I don't want to get too into it because right now the budget is a big thing, but it is when sometimes they reduce the federal workforce, they reduce the federal workforce but increase the federal contracting force. And sometimes the same person who is making a perfectly good federal salary can make what I think anybody would consider to be a larger amount of money as a contractor. And why does this work out for the government? I guess they have algorithms that say because there's not benefits and vesting retirement that's being contributed to, and because the right to terminate becomes so much more difficult as time goes on, and whatever the case may be, and because they do work on, they probably have different budget items for outside contractors versus bringing in staff, so it's easier to bring in a 24-year-old or whatever the cases are. This is all speculation. It's probably all only partly correct, but that's a nice one. That's you normally know what your job is going to be. You normally know who your client is going to be.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes exclusive, but it doesn't always have to be exclusive as long as you're not competing or revealing secrets. There's typically a contract involved. You definitely want that looked at, especially if you don't plan to be exclusive. And but you do have to do certain things. And usually, so with the federal government, they almost always require that you become a limited liability company. Now, it's a good idea anyway. I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe it's to show less people on books. Maybe it's because the concept of an employee versus an independent contractor is one that's always in dispute. But there's no dispute when you're not hiring a human being. If you're hiring Jeff Lippman, I could say, hey, you called me an independent contractor, but I'm an employee. You owe me overtime. You haven't paid my payroll taxes for the last 7 years. But if you hire Jeff Lippman LLC, that's not a person. That's an it. So there's some of that, but there's also a limited liability company with an insurance policy that insures the limited liability company, and oftentimes they require the amount of insurance, which is a blessing and a curse. Sometimes people don't think about insurance, but everyone who has their own business at least should. And a lot of times they have no idea what's the right amount of coverage for me. You don't have to decide if your contract tells you what the minimum coverage is. So, it takes one question. You just present it to your insurance agent and get it. Should we back up and talk about what a LLC is, limited liability company?
Well, actually, that's what I want to circle back to, if you don't mind, and in fact,
Okay.
expanding. So two things, the LLC, and then also, I also wanted to touch base on the subcontractor because I want to get my head around that so the viewers have their head around that because some have said that an independent contractor, although you certainly are if you're working for a company, perhaps like a realtor, where they're independent contractors, but they actually work for an organization. So are they employees or aren't they? But they're not paying, the company isn't paying employment insurance, things like that. So maybe you could stretch out both of those, Jeff, just to clarify.
Let's start with the independent
Thank
contractor
you.
one, and it's going to be so unsatisfactory to everyone. So,
Okay.
first of all, there's an IRS test for what is and what isn't an independent contractor. Probably if there's 51 jurisdictions in the United States, there's 51 different local level tests for what is and isn't an independent contractor. And I doubt any two of them are exactly identical.
Okay.
Further, if you apply the independent contractor test to probably 80% of independent contractors out there, you'd probably come off with the smell test saying, this stinks, this fails. I'm not an independent contractor. This is an independent contractor. This is an employee. And alas, that's where all the muddiness comes in. Independent contractor is supposed to be the main factor isn't time, it's not exclusivity, it's non-competes, it's not intellectual property, it's not work for, it's control. Who has control? How much self-control does the independent contractor have over their use of tools? If they want to wear a tennis shirt instead of a suit and tie, if they want to work from home, if they want to use a certain type of a laptop instead of coming to the office, you can require someone to work 40 hours, but unless it's absolutely essential to your business, maybe those 40 hours are 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. one day, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. the next day, 6 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Whatever, the person can make their own time as long as they get
Sure.
the work done. Oftentimes there's non-exclusivity, but not always. But even in the employment sector, there's non. I'm a lawyer by day. I do podcasting, as you and your audience probably knows.
Yeah.
But if I decide to become a waiter at a bar, someone would hire me. I could have another job as long as it doesn't conflict with my present job. A lot of things that I think people know intuitively, once you start applying them to law, they get unnecessarily confusing. But in a gig economy, independent contractor, often you come with your own tools. So think of the Uber driver. It's their car, it's their insurance. They have to provide a copy of their license, their driving record, their insurance. They have to say that the car is in good working order. It's less than 5 years old. And they're gonna take rides when they take rides. So if they want to do it from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. 3 days a week, that's fine. Same with DoorDash or whatever. That's probably your gig economy. But an independent contractor is an independent contractor for you as let's just say the company or we'll call it the employer, which is, I'm using the wrong word. But if you own a home or a business and you hire a plumber is your independent contractor. They're not an independent contractor themselves. They're a company. That's their full-time gig, and they might have employees and they might even have subcontract, but they're an independent contractor to you. You're their client. They work for you for this job, but you're not really their boss. Now, if you get into a fight, they can say, take this job and shove it, and
Right.
either expect you to pay them for what they've done or sue you, or you can sue them, or whatever the case might be. They don't get unemployment. They don't get workers' compensation. There's a lot of places where it's frequently contested. One is my favorite, which is pro wrestling. Another is mixed martial arts and boxing. And there's some places where people who probably aren't independent contractors don't want to challenge it because they enjoy the freedom of being an independent contractor. But it's muddy. I can't give you a clear answer. Just the
Sure.
more freedom you have, the more likely you are to meet an independent contractor versus an employee. A subcontractor is usually an independent contractor, but the subcontractor just means you're working under another contract. You could contract with me. Let's just say I'm not a lawyer. Okay, let's say I'm a lawyer. You contract with me. You don't have general counsel. All you're doing, your general counsel contracts with me to be your litigation manager for a big case. And I say, that's great, but we don't do discovery. So I subcontract to a company that supplies 80 attorneys for 6 months to go through 200,000 pages of discoverable materials. And then I subcontract a court reporter. I subcontract the process service. I subcontract another attorney who's an expert in this particular field. So, so a subcontractor is just someone that's working sub to the primary contractor. They're often an independent contractor, probably usually an independent contractor, but it's not necessarily related to the independent contractor status writ large, if that makes sense.
It does.
Okay.
So
What was the other question
at
that
the LLC, let's go back to that,
okay.
so if they're opening up a new business and they're just starting, what do you recommend is legally? And I'm aware, again, you have disclaimers, but legally, what should they be doing to start their business, to get it launched and feel comfortable that they're on the right path?
Some point within the last 1,000 years, someone invented the concept of the limited liability company, which, by the way, is why in the UK, corporations are LTD instead of INC, because it's limited. And some say that was one of the greatest things that have ever led to human innovation and advancement in history, up there with wheels, fire, horses, and building boats and ships, metallurgy, whatever. I'm gonna go through the 12 things of Atlantis from the Donovan song. But it simply stands for limited liability company. What that means is that if something goes wrong, usually it is the assets of the company that are at stake, not what you have built yourself independently, your retirement savings, your bank account, your car, your home, your dog, your video game collection. And if there's two of you, it doesn't apply to your spouse's stuff, the stuff that you built together as a marital unit or just a unit or a group home or whatever. Your personal stuff is not at stake. Now, marital property usually has its own sort of ultra separate sacrosanct shield, but that's not it's one should not be a substitute of another. Now, not all businesses carry a lot of liability, so maybe you can sleep easy with the right kind of insurance, but I'd say 30 years ago when a woman got burned from ordering McDonald's coffee in a drive-through and there was a multi-million-dollar verdict, who's to say what's a high liability
Yeah.
issue and what's not? Or just because something isn't a viable case doesn't mean that someone's not going to bring it and doesn't mean it won't make your life miserable for months or years. So I would say it's usually a fairly low-end investment to form some sort of limited liability company.
Yeah.
Now, in Maryland, DC, an LLC is a perfectly reasonable one, but I understand in New York, it's actually more expensive to form an LLC than maybe some other options like an S corporation. And there are, with an S corporation, my understanding is the big difference, aside from structurally, it's easier to go public or form a C corporation, is that you have to you need to know that you're going to be making at least X amount of money because you must pay a salary as opposed to an LLC where you can ride with the ebbs and flows. So, if you're not sure what your income is going to be, but it's like an EKG or it could be like an EKG, you may want the flexibility of the LLC. But if you are that federal contractor we talked about that's getting a contract from the Department of Defense and you have a $270,000 contract, you can probably right away be an S corporation or at least be taxed as an S corporation, which is another little side note, which may be a little weedy, but LLCs are creations of state law. So you do get to tell the IRS how you want to be taxed, but there's only a finite number of options and there are pros and cons with everything. But if it's just you can be a sole proprietorship, or you can be taxed as an S corporation, or you can even be taxed as a C corporation, which just to keep it simple, this is way too oversimplistic, but the C corporation must file its own tax returns independently. An S corporation, it's pass through. So it can be a Schedule C on your own taxes like an LLC. Or a general partnership, which is if there's more than one of you, but you haven't formed an entity. So those are your options. And you must tell the IRS within 90 days, or they're going to tax you as the default, which would be if you're solo, sole proprietorship, if there's two or more of you as a general partnership. Now you can change that, but the change is not valid until next tax year. So depending on the timing, that could be a minor inconvenience or it could be a major thing. So should be aware of those things. And different states have different regulatory schemes on how to keep up with compliance and licensing. So we're really not going to get into that today, except to the extent of the previous sentence.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that, Jeff. I appreciate that. So what I'm thinking is, so we have people who retire, as we talked about, in the senior years, and they've worked their whole lives and they have a lot of benefits that they can offer. They can do services, consulting, things like that. So my thought was for the over 50 group, and then maybe 60 or 70, I don't know. When we're looking at that, as a lawyer, and I know people should be getting consultations and find out about what they're doing, but is it relatively safe to go into a new business and get started or do a side hustle today? So many people are doing it, even we're doing this show and things like that. So you feeling it's pretty good for people to go into, talk to their lawyers and get it all set up? Because I know you like to see businesses succeed, as we all do, but you're pretty good at that.
I would say that if you talk to 10 lawyers, that at least 9 of them are going to prefer that somebody have some sort of limited liability entity and or at least very adequate insurance, which is going to cover them and maybe umbrella onto their homeowners as well. Because even if your job is that you're just going to sell watercolors that you do, somebody at some point is going to be unhappy, and that somebody may be that person who's decided that they are Superman and you are Lex Luthor, and their mission is to take you down. These things happen. I see it. Obviously, lawyers hear more bad things than regular people, but usually when I talk to someone, they're always like, yeah, that happened to my cousin, or yeah, my uncle did. Usually forming a company is real, it feels more intimidating than it is. In the beginning, you feel like there's a lot and you're just going to be burdened with administration. And for the most part, after a couple months, it's just going to be your new normal. It just is. We are very adaptable as people.
Yeah.
But I will say this, when you get older, you generally have more to protect. Savings,
Yeah.
homes,
Yeah.
and you probably don't want your kid's college fund or your retirement fund or your second home fund or your nest egg or whatever being at risk. I'm not saying this is a great idea, but when you're in your 20s, if you're high risk and you own nothing, either you're judgment proof, you're like, I'll just keep filing bankruptcies. There are people who file bankruptcy, who wait every 7 years to file bankruptcies, or they file a Chapter 7, then they file a Chapter 13, and they file a couple of Chapter 13s. And as long as it's not for absolute fraud, that's usually okay. I mean, if you keep accumulating thousands of dollars in debt because people are financing you, VC or whatever, or just your credit card companies keep offering you money, and you max out your credit cards and it doesn't work out, you haven't done anything wrong. You may have to pay some percentage of it in Chapter 13, wait until 7 years goes by, file your, again, I'm oversimplifying things,
No, I
but it's,
understand.
yeah, but when you're young, you can take risks and make mistakes. I'm not saying that's a great idea either. I would actually opine that it's no different for anyone of any age. You should all try to build the smartest foundation that's sustainable for the longest term success and safety as possible. And
Yeah.
they do go hand in hand. You just don't realize it until something bad happens. I mean, nobody plans to have a fire in their home, but when they do, they're very glad that they've been paying for fire insurance.
You're
You know,
right.
so yeah.
That's excellent advice. And I think there's a lot of people. So today I'm thinking in general, it's just my opinion, we're living longer, we're taking care of ourselves. We have a chance in this generation to really do those things we always wanted to do. And you want to lay a good foundation down. And I think you're absolutely right, Jeff. That's what you're there for. You're there to say, okay, you want to do this, you want to move forward. Let's do it, give you some comfort, give you breathing room, let you get going. And you're right, those risks that we took when we're younger, we don't necessarily want to take when we're older. So this is a good way to get that great foundation and then build your side business or that hobby you've always wanted to do, things like that, right?
Yeah, if you build your credit up to be 750, you don't want it to be knocked down because of a commercial dispute with a vendor or whatnot that didn't send you the right product, but they
Yeah.
they report it to a credit bureau because they have a relationship with, they have a credit app, and then they have a collection agency who, is going to report it, and you're going to get calls forever. You'll still get calls under the LLC, but they're not going to be asking for you. They're going to be asking for the president, or at least what's under the name of the LLC. So the difference in the consequences are very real, even though it feels like all you did was a little bit of paperwork. And our entire form of life is about, it's like legal fictions, like a driver's license or a birth certificate. You're not born if you don't have a birth certificate. You're
Yeah,
still there,
exactly.
but you get a birth certificate. It's not to get it, but like people say, no person's illegal. That's true. The person's still a person, but but context is key. We have legal fictions. Land titles are legal fictions. When you see all those ads in the newspaper, even though nobody reads newspapers anymore, and it's the newspaper in your county, and it's talking about a case that involves someone in South Dakota, there's still the legal fiction that place in South Dakota has notice because it was printed in the newspaper, even though it was in your county, which is 2,000 miles away from South Dakota. So legal fictions are there, and if you just put those two words together, it's like math. When two negatives equals a positive,
Yeah.
legal fiction equals nonfiction.
Perfect. So Jeff, thank you. I want to ask you now, let's go to you and your business. Let's talk about, I know that you have your law firm. If somebody wants to reach out to you today, get some advice and perhaps wants to start their business or launch it, or just wants advice from you in general, where can they reach you?
Okay. I work for a firm called Dunlop, Bennett, and Ludwig, PLLC, which is also an interesting because we don't have PLLCs in Maryland. They do in Virginia where the firm is located. Like common law marriage, we don't have it in Maryland, but if it's legal somewhere else, we recognize it. The firm is multi-state. You probably already figured that out. To an extent, international. We do a lot of IP litigation, major litigation. We have a estates and wealth department. We have a white collar criminal attorney. We do some major torts accidents. We've got an immigration attorney. We have government election law attorneys. People deal with federal acquisition regulations, but also businesses, regular businesses, real estate, commercial leases. And then there's the folks like me, the jacks of all trade, the more retail level. So if they want to reach me, they can reach out to Dunlop, Bennett, and Ludwig. They can maybe get me or somebody maybe even better and more handsome or more whatever. They'll get someone wonderful. But yeah, and phone number 703-777-7319. If you want to check out our website, there's lots of blogs and things like that. It's dbllawyers.com, Delta Bravo Lima, and then another L for lawyers. So dbllawyers.com. So yeah, check all that stuff out.
Perfect. I'll make sure all of that's in the show notes for you too, Jeff. Okay. Now, so one last thing. So you've been great today and you've been on a couple of times. I'm hoping that you'll come back again like a regular every now and then if you pop your head in and say hello to everybody. Would you do that for us?
Sure. Just they have to know that the more things you get me to talk about, the more well-rounded you're going to find my spheres of influence or interest are, and that the rounding may start to look like the wheels of Ezekiel or the many-eyed beast Argos. So, yeah.
Tell us what your podcast is, Jeff. What's the name of it?
Oh my goodness, there's so many now. All right. So, Garden of Thought is the general heading for my podcast, meaning just me and me alone. But even that's not exactly true. So, I basically have two or three personalities under that show. I used to call one Garden of Doom and Garden Views. I just subsumed them into Garden of Thought, so I didn't have to worry about which came out during the midweek and during the weekend. Just take those. There's like Joe Rogan's variety without celebrities, without the uber broness, and without the complete embrace of conspiracies. But there is that variety. I would say the weekend one, if you turn on the History Channel at 7 p.m. and just leave it on till 3 a.m., that kind of landscape, the midweek one tends to be maybe something like this, a discussion like this, something that you might have seen on the old 48 Hours show or 2020 or
Right.
even 60 Minutes. But politics, news, real, geopolitical, a lot of legal. I'm very interested in the laws of space and extrapolating that to the laws of space, which led us to a lot of interesting areas like international airports, maritime law, aviation law, things of the immigration, of course. So we really explored a lot of different areas there, and we'll continue to do. And then my sort of favorite is GOT presents the Gospel of Thomas because no, it's not biblical. My partner on that, my co-host, is Mr. Thomas from Major League Wrestling. And we talk to people in wrestling, oftentimes not about wrestling things at all. It was formerly the Book of Black because my co-host then was PJ Black. Some people might know him as Justin Gabriel from his WWE days. And then PJ will be back again at some point. I just don't know when. And it was the same thing. But with PJ, stuff got deep with PJ was really into esoteric. Me and Thomas, that can go anywhere. And one segment is Teach Jeff Pop Culture because I don't know anything. I don't even know who Sabrina Carpenter. I know she's a singer, but so that's how out of things I am. I also do a bunch of wrestling related. I'm a frequent guest, but on the Wrestling Soup Network. I love Wrestling Soup, so on WrestlingSoup.com. There's a feed called the Wrestling Soup and Friendos. Yes, Friendos. And the show on that is called Dose of Chocolate. I'm Dose. My co-host is White Chocolate, who's neither white nor chocolate. And we review Evolve, which is WWE's single A television show on Tubi. So it's like kids going up and
Yeah.
so it's fun. I think we're the only podcast that covers that. The only one that matters. We also did a show called on Sovereign Citizens, so that was fun too. And then the new show that just debuted today is with the legendary pro wrestler Lufisto and myself, a pioneer of women's wrestling, almost 30 years in the business. And we're reviewing WWE's Legends and Future Greats, LFG. Obviously, you think it stands for something else. And that is like their reality competition show for people to compete for contracts.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah, Evander Holyfield's son is one of the contestants.
Oh wow.
Last year, an Olympic gold medalist, female, won the female bracket. So this is some real deal stuff, and that's a lot of fun. I'm just tickled pink to be doing a show with Lufisto on that. I don't know if you like wrestling. I do a lot of stuff. If you don't, now you're probably questioning why you were listening for the last 30 minutes.
Jeff, you're always so fun. You are one busy guy.
I like being busy, but I like being busy. Listen, my newest thing is we rescued a turtle, and now
Oh, I
people
saw
always
that.
post
That was
pictures. Yeah, people have been bothering me for years, posting pictures of their dopey cats and their dopey dogs. Yeah, sure, they're cute, but they look the same in every picture. So I'm like, I'm going to do things with the turtle. So we put the turtle in strange poses and whatever, and strange situations, and sometimes it's not so strange, but from the picture, I can make it seem funny, like the turtles are sitting on my neck. So I say, today we were playing Dracula. But we went away for 3 days, left the turtle alone. It's a free range turtle. And we come back and she laid a giant egg. It's like the size of her leg. And then we're like, we told her no parties while away. And this no good harlot hussy comes back pregnant.
I
So,
love it. I saw that one too. You're so fun.
and it's just a turtle. They have like 9 thoughts in their head, which are basically want to sleep here, you can't see me, don't want this, want that. But we dressed it up in a little X-Men costume, but of course there's a villain called the Toad, and so I complained we were fighting Toad again. We're always fighting Toad. So
I love it. Oh, I'm going to make sure your shows are on here so everybody can follow you. You're a lot of fun, Jeff. Truly, you're one of those characters. I'm so glad I met you, and I'm thrilled that you came on my show.
clip that.
Thank you, Jeff, again. So
That's a wrap.
so this is Jeff Lippman, and I'm going to have all his information there. He's a wonderful lawyer and attorney that you might like to get some counseling from if you're thinking about starting your own business. He's got great ideas and he's there to help you, and he always wants to see people succeed. That's what's great about him. Do go over and take a look at his podcast. I'll make sure I have those on here. And Jeff, thank you so much for joining us again. I can't wait till you come back.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And to everyone else, this is Teresa Aker from Success Diaries with Teresa Aker. My new channel as we shift over is going to be called Life After 50 with Teresa Aker. We're still going to have another channel, so we have 2 of them up. And just like Jeff, I love being busy too, and I like to talk to all of you. So thank you for joining. Do subscribe to my channel. I truly appreciate that. I hope you're having a great day, and I look forward to talking to you all very soon. Bye-bye.